Hi, thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to my official YouTube channel. Go to my website, www.susanmealing.com. And if you're going to leave a comment, make sure to have etiquette and respect. So in the process of updating my website, www.susanmealing.com, I saw a video that I'm getting ready to post, and I remembered a few things. So those who have heard of ENRON and the East Coast areas, tri-state area obviously, in New York City mainly, but also New York State, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, there is this small company, teeny tiny, itsy bitsy company called ENRON. And although some people may have heard a bit more. So the majority of stuff that was discussed in the 1990s, especially when it came to ENRON, had to do with more so the family situations because of the connections and all these other aspects such as the IRS situation and stuff like that, because that was kind of some of the only ways certain things could be figured out from what some people had said. And so there were a bunch of combined situations, and apparently there was certain difficulties getting the individual who really was a large part of ENRON, one of the largest parts of ENRON, because of the intricacies putting everything together. Supposedly, this guy was considered an idiot savant because he just did his work, didn't really bother anybody. He was kind, a ridiculous level of kind, from what people had said who knew who he was. He was an idiot savant, though, which, for those who don't know what the terminology is to translate to an idiot savant, he was extremely intelligent, to a degree of genius level, and yet had absolutely no idea when it came to interpersonal discussions. One of the sweetest people you could meet from what the descriptions were, except if he got angry. If he got angry, he spoke the truth. It was said that he could hurt feelings, not intentionally though. That was the other thing. It was usually that, from what was said by people that I knew in the 1990s especially, that he wasn't really a mean individual. It was more along the lines of only when his stress levels got to a certain point would he ever bring anything up. He was one of the types of individuals that, for the most part, you would never really truthfully know he was dealing with stuff. You would have rumors that certain things were going on. You would have the knowledge that, okay, the business is stressful, but you wouldn't really know what level it would get to with this guy from what was said. And so this particular guy, who was an idiot savant, supposedly, he had no idea about all of the situations, and yet he did. He had known, but he had overlooked a lot of stuff because he was just keeping to himself. He was just minding his own and not really bothering anybody, except for when it was found out that he had come up with an integrated system that had been so above and beyond anything that anybody had ever heard of, thought of. There was the capacities which it was beyond anything that anybody really truthfully thought was possible. Because if you take a look at the electrical grid, especially when it comes to New York City and Pennsylvania and New Jersey. The grid system, as far as the electrical layouts, were so, the wording, and I do apologize, I had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, and I deal with memory deficits and cognitive disorders, as well as headaches and migraines. And I went from college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to second grade math. So the wording is a bit of a difficulty because of the time, because this was the 1990s. So, and this is the 17th of May, 2022. So, word on the street at the time frame, especially around Manhattan and New Jersey, had been, this guy was literally one of the sweetest people you would ever meet. He would literally give you the shirt off of his back if he had an extra shirt, to just, no big deal, no problem. You know, you would just, that was the word on the street, though additionally he was an idiot savant. So he was capable to come up with all of these intricate details for the specifics of the technology grid for the electrical companies. And he was capable to review these different areas that nobody really thought about because of the way things were moving at the time frame. He was very kind, from what it was said. And you wouldn't ever think about it if you were to look at him, because if you knew anything about him, he just looked like a normal guy. Nothing really that technically stood out to a degree. You know, he would wear regular clothing at the time, as to whatever the clothing was from what was said. He would go to wherever he felt like going, because he was just respectful wherever he went. And in this reference, it was said that he just was an idiot. But he wasn't. This is where the idiot savant comes in. So if he were to speak with people, he would just, you know, a different version of Freedom of Information Act. You could literally ask him anything, and he would go into all of these details, supposedly. My hair is, I'm in the process of growing my hair out. So excuse me. It's really annoying. It's been a long time since I've had my hair in my face before. It's been, well, since around 2005. This is the longest my hair has been since 2005. So it's 2022. It's a bit much to deal with, especially with headaches and migraines, and I have allergies, so with headaches and migraines, so it's a bit difficult, but nonetheless. So I forgot my hair moves too. And I'm inside, so it's not like there's really a wind, and so my hair moving is a little bit of an annoyance at times. Nonetheless, supposedly this guy was such an idiot savant that he had cared enough for people to actually live and progress and all that sort of stuff, but he had absolutely no idea when individuals were making attempts to speak with him about certain plans. And so he just would, it's not that he didn't care, it was more along the lines of his thoughts supposedly moved so fast, nobody really could keep up with him. They made attempts at times, and they could when they had only certain individualized people to speak with this guy, because he was just at that level. It was also said he was extremely young, that most people really wouldn't have ever had any inclination that he had anything. He was one of those, I've heard the term, I just can't remember what the term is, where he was rich with information, rich with thoughts and capabilities, though he didn't dress that way. He didn't dress as to the level of what finances would be as to those timeframes. And he was capable, he worked in the area, so the clothing he technically could purchase for himself, he just didn't. He was just one of those, it was as it was. If he had to get dressed up, he dressed up. Otherwise, he just looked like anybody else on the street at the time whenever he was walking around, as it was said. And so it was said in the 1990s that it didn't matter who someone really was in reference to wherever he went. He would talk with anybody, which became an issue because he had come up with this integrated system that was so potent that the levels of government had found out about him, and they didn't want to put a kibosh on him. That was not it at all. It was more along the lines of, because of, and you have the reference of Enron, because of what he had put together, because of the grid, he was capable to take a look at the different areas to rearrange the infrastructure in certain references. So that way, from one location to another, it would be more seamless in comparison to the different the disconnections that sometimes would occur, especially for those who know about the 1980s and 1990s regarding the electrical systems, but also at the same time the cable, the internet, the telephone lines, the cell phone towers, and stuff like that. And so he was one of what people said was he was one of the individuals that it was realigned because of what he put together and the ways that the electrical situations were. It went much better in comparison to what it could have been, though it was said that he was the biggest idiot savant ever, that nobody really thought that, first and foremost, nobody really thought that he was really anything special in that regard. They figured he was special, but in that sort of that way, in comparison to how much of a genius he had actually been. And the irony is, most people who had discussed him, they went on and explained to others. They had no idea he could even think in that capacity, because they had spoken with him, and the word was that, yeah, if you spoke with him, he would go on and on about anything and everything, which would confuse people, because he was young. He didn't really have certain capacities of. They didn't really understand a lot of times some of the other things he would bring up, because he would put into context these other situations that didn't make sense to them unless they had the time to essentially listen to him. And some people, especially in the tri-state area and in New York City, anybody who's been in the vicinity knows that it's a fast-paced environment. So going and getting those particular details, there were individuals that just had guys that they could just go take care of this, go do that, in comparison. Well, when he had come up with this extremely detailed system, he didn't go into full detail. He only went into certain parts of certain situations because it was said, which, when you think about it, rightfully so, he was kind of a smidgen nervous because he had come up with all this stuff, and because of the way things were in the 1980s and 1990s, He was frightened easily. It was said he was startled very, very easily and quite sensitive towards a lot of things that most people didn't even realize that they were doing. And so he had supposedly, this is again supposedly, because I don't know if I've ever met this guy at all. I wouldn't have the slightest inclination, mainly because of the after effects of my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. And so it was said that, I do remember hearing about this, I should say, he had basically aligned the best way to make an attempt to explain it, he had aligned this pattern in the grid format of the tri-state area, found a way to take into consideration prior lines that already had been put down and utilize the majority or recycle the majority of the pieces without having to do much replacement pieces. So he was capable to take a look at the different wires as well as the circumferencing encasements and look at other pieces that could be integrated more easily in comparison to ripping everything out, redoing everything completely. And so he was one of those types of guys, but you would have never know. He was just an individual that when he was walking around wherever he was walking around, nobody had the slightest inclination that he was at that level at all. And the word was that nobody really even thought about it, because even when ENRON really started being well known, nobody really thought about wondering who it was. They didn't think about finding who ENRON, because it was a company. So it was more along the lines of, well, you know, that's whatever it is. That's just another company. That's just another stock market, I think, is where it started. And then it became more than what it was. I think it became a situation where it was taken off the stock market after a certain point, because there was something in reference to this guy, and essentially the local and state government found out who he was. And so they didn't want to harm him. They just wanted answers, because how could this guy have all this knowledge, all this understanding, and yet not pick up at all? I heard stories about this guy. So apparently they had sent people to go speak with him. Well, he was an idiot savant, and nobody really, there was the knowledge that there were idiot savants in the 1990s. Not many people had ever met one. And so this guy, just kind, just as he was, these people who were accustomed to the way businesses were accustomed to all these other factors, well, they were speaking with an idiot savant. So he was extremely intelligent with all these other factors, except a discussion about what normal sorts of ish in regards of business. So where other people would be, you know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge sort of stuff, he would just stand there. This is what was said. He would stand there, or he'd sit there wherever they were, and just kind of, oh, well, that's good, and all that sort. Good for him. Well, congratulations, and stuff like that. He was an idiot savant. He had absolutely no idea that they were making references to a possibility regarding the work that he had come up with. He had no idea that they were actually bringing these ideas forward to him. He'd go and explain stuff to them, though, because he was an idiot savant. And so they would make comments, and after a while, it wasn't so from what was said, at first, it was okay. At first, because you had certain businesses that would go speak with this guy. And he wouldn't have a problem. Except, there were other people in the vicinity. And so, because other people were in the vicinity, then it became more and more of an issue. And so then, as time went onward, the local and state government found out about this idiot savant. So they'd start doing the same thing that some of the business individuals did. They'd send a few people to go see how much of an idiot this genius was. And it would prove each and every time he was an absolute genius. And at the exact same time, the largest idiot, from what was said, the largest idiot in every capacity of. Most well-intentioned person you would ever meet, a bit scattered in quite a few capacities. It was said that there was whatever regarding his life. There were situations which some had said that he came from a decent background. There were those who had said that he had difficulties, and as an idiot savant, well, there's no denying he probably did have a lot of difficulties. Especially when you take in consideration, from what was said, how many people made genuine attempts to bring this guy in, and they just couldn't. Because the irony is, because he was such an idiot savant, so he was completely just and from the stories that I had heard, there were some people who really, they genuinely made these genuine attempts, and he was just completely blind to it. Completely just didn't see anything. It became a large issue. Well, some people that were trying to get him to come into this stuff complained to the wrong people. They complained to the government. They had completely informed, knowingly, that these individuals were in the government. Didn't really think twice about it. It was just, they were venting, sort of thing. And they had no idea how the government actually worked. They thought that whatever they thought, because depending on who you spoke with, they thought that they could do whatever because of the capacities of, I don't know the specifics because all I know is what I heard about. And so these particular officials, at first, when they heard about this idiot savant, were, oh. And so what was explained to me from the few that I can remember, when they would listen to some of these people who would complain, these individuals would, oh, well, what are you talking about? And then some people had actually shown certain things that this idiot savant had put together. And that was the catalyst. That was where those individuals really didn't realize who they were actually working with. And so this idiot savant had no idea that not only did the different businesses want in on certain things, they had alerted the government. that takes things to a different level. For everybody, in every capacity. And so, in some ways, this idiot savant, supposedly what was occurring, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know if I ever met this idiot savant. But I was informed that the individual had a lot of issues. It wasn't necessarily bad, but because he was an idiot savant. He didn't understand. So where no one was actually really wanting to hurt him, it was more along the lines of they wanted the information, they wanted the understanding. But because he was an idiot savant, getting that was very difficult. Because there were, and this is the 1990s, as far as the tri-state area, you have a lot of bureaucracy. You have a lot of legal situations regarding that. And then you have the business aspects. And so everybody was making attempts to get him, to speak with him. Because how do you integrate all these systems? And he very easily, obviously since Enron became what it did, could easily explain everything. Could easily go into all these details. Could easily just A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Except getting him to do the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Apparently, it was extremely difficult. Yeah. It was supposedly they had, between the businesses and the government, and this is how it kind of got a little bit more interwoven in the Northeast, in the tri-state area, the political aspects with the elected aspects, with the business aspects, kind of all went surrounding this idiot savant, super target sort of situation where they went, and it wasn't in a prior sort of way, it was more along the lines of they wanted to have the understanding, but they had nobody. There was no one that they could ask. They thought they could, because a lot of people would, that guy, yeah, he's really easy to talk with, he's really sweet, he's this, he's that, no problem, whatever. Some people embellished a little bit. Some people gave a little bit more of an impression that they knew this guy than they actually had, and others didn't really explain other situations. So you have the news as far as the 1990s regarding the different situations that occurred, because nobody really knew this idiot savant. They knew of him. There were those who did know him. Though they were so far and few between, it was in the late 1990s, it was said that only like 10 to maybe 13 or 14 people kind of ish knew him, ish, to a degree. And even then, they could only give so much information as to how to approach this idiot savant, because he was that much of an idiot. But he was that much of a genius at the exact same time. The irony, though, is the word was that a lot of the certain individuals within, because they were capable to discuss certain things more honestly with others regarding certain levels, supposedly I mean, people in Enron would know far better than I, as far as especially if there's the originating members still a part of, if they're still there, or if they are in a different capacity where essentially, because they were honest, it wasn't that it was overlooked, but it was overlooked. It was just one of those, well, you know, it's above board, it's legal in whatever capacity, consent, whatever, of certain situations, in comparison to some of the other stuff. And so, which was, it was its own irony in its own right, because of quite a few situations that other people, and the full details as to what the situations were at the time vary, because there were people who had said this idiot Savant had met with people, but nobody knew some of these people, because this idiot Savant had made attempts to explain who he had met with, and nobody knew who they were. And there was no record of some of these individuals. Some of the, it's kind of irony. So E equals MC squared, or Elon Musk, as far as that's concerned, he had originally named his child a combination of letters and numbers. It was in the news. In certain rumors, this idiot Savant had given these weird names that some had just letters that were compiled together that weren't actual words in the English language. And so he would start making these noises to make attempts to explain. This was what the rumors were, and you had to be certain people. And these people who supposedly, regarding the rumors that were at the time, these people didn't even have real connections to this guy in comparison to other people that had a better understanding, as better as you could, in comparison to this idiot Savant. They had come across a discussion, and they were in the area and he was having the discussion, but nobody knew who he was speaking with. Some people actually had seen-ish who this guy was speaking with, and yet not. Nobody could really describe who he was speaking with, because they could give certain attributes, but because of not really being capable to, because it was usually at night. And so in the evening hours, you can only have certain viewpoints. And they could give, the rumors were that it was a shadowy figure. Well, at night, sometimes there's shadows. Sometimes, you know, because it's nighttime. It's kind of how that goes. And so, but some of the rumors were that they actually heard him having discussions with these people. But that's all they could say. And so there were rumors in regards of this idiot Savant that they could not actually pinpoint some of the individuals he was speaking with. They had secluded him, took a bunch of stuff out of what have you, and he wasn't crazy, he wasn't insane, it was the level of intelligence that he had. And so rumors were, as far as that's concerned, that it was wondered what he was speaking with instead, because it was rumored that he was religious. So there was that. And then because of certain other factors at the time frame, especially when it came to certain governmental aspects, there were those concerns, because some of the some who knew certain things. And so some of the, in reference to the rumors regarding these group of very small number of individuals that had seen this guy speak with, the combination of name aspects or words were along certain lines that certain, there's a dog barking. I was born in the year of the dog. Obviously, I'm talking. That's different. But I can make the joke. Nonetheless, for this lecture, so the word was, he was the biggest moron ever. Ridiculously, just absolutely just as intelligent as he was exactly how stupid he was. Like, it was to that level, where he could go on about anything and everything. Not a problem whatsoever. Could pick up on all these other details, could explain elaborately, utilize the ways of to fully bring things forward, and yet, at the exact same time, completely oblivious. That's what it was said. I don't know how to verify that, because this was just, these were rumors at the time frame. And so when Enron really stepped forward, this idiot Savant supposedly there was some sort of small-ish briefing regarding where people in the general public could be there and discuss with him. This is true. And yet it was not really publicized. It was a situation where the wording, I can't remember as far as how it was explained. It wasn't an event per se, but it was an event. It wasn't really publicized, but there was a write-up done, and it was where certain things were passed out in reference to this write-up. In what would be, so for those who know the difference between the San Antonio Express News and the San Antonio Current regarding the state of Texas, it was smaller than the San Antonio Current. It was one of, I don't know another example, but I know that there are those examples, and it was in that particular situation where only certain individuals who paid attention to certain things. And so I was listening to a Joe Rogan Experience official YouTube channel, and in the clip, I can't remember which one, it was discussed how do these conspiracy theorists get to a certain point. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if in prior years they had read something in one of those smaller articles. And not saying that it was smaller, it was a smaller newspaper. And with a smaller newspaper and those individuals that have been labeled as conspiracy theorists or what have you, I wouldn't be surprised if some of them would attend certain locations such as, and what would be smaller in size to the San Antonio Current would be to that, and I know that there's a few, I just can't remember what they're called, and they're only in certain locations. I just can't remember where, I do apologize. But if I remember correctly, that's kind of where some of the stuff would stem from. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Rogan and that male that he was speaking with about the conspiracy theory aspects, if a lot of the individuals had found some smaller offshoots of publications, and then as time progressed forward from whether it was in, I don't know what year those would have started depending on, though I'll give the reference of, obviously would have to be before the year of 2000, because I know I had seen some of these papers in the year of 2000. So, maybe the 1980s, 1990s time frame, just a small, little, thin newspaper sort of printing in the vicinity of. And the irony is, if I remember correctly, I had gone to one of these locations. I can't remember where. In my defense, it was after I woke up from my coma after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. I wasn't driving. I went with some people somewhere, and I can't remember where. And I remember seeing these periodicals, and I had asked, because I had seen certain locations in the tri-state area that had certain similarities to that, and had asked, well, where do they come from? And the equivalent, so there were 3 at the time, in whatever location this was. So one was the San Antonio Current, and then one was a thinner version, and then there was another one that was thinner than that, but they kind of shared a bit of the area where the papers were. And I wouldn't be surprised, because I did grab one of each to read, to take a look at. It wouldn't be a surprise to me if that's where some of the conspiracy theory individuals kind of stem from, because especially depending on the years as to that, but for that particular example, those particular situations, reading about certain things, because some of the stuff would seem very outlandish, but if you had an open mind and knew where to look for certain things, you'd be capable to verify the details, because, well, it's known that in certain references, sometimes names are whatever in that reference. So I can give the reference of when I had gone to the rave, and I had to explain, which it was very difficult at that time. So there was a female that I had been introduced to, and she went by the moniker of Princess Jasmine. Well, that's obviously not her real name, and because I was in medical hold unit, and I had a head injury on Palm Sunday earlier that year, it was known I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain. And it was also known that I was only allowed, as a child, 17 years old, only allowed to see G-rated movies until I was 13 years old. I wasn't allowed to see PG-rated movies until after I was 13 years old. So it was known. That they thought that I was referring to, I don't know what the definition regarding the psychological viewpoint of that would be. However, that's kind of what they thought in comparison to how I was explaining. No, I met a female. She said her name in the scene is Princess Jasmine, and this, that, and the other. And the army was just mad that I went to a rave. They were upset that I had wound up at Brackenridge. They didn't pay attention to certain other factors at that time, though I made attempts to explain that. And so I also was born and raised in New Jersey and around the tri-state area, and so that was not uncommon to me. So for me, and anybody who is in the underground scene up in the tri-state area, you know how that goes. So, especially in the 1980s and 1990s, especially the 1990s. And so, there's that. I made attempts to explain to officers in the Army, as well as enlisted, though the officers were the ones that had the largest difficulty. And yet the irony for certain officers, because some of these certain officers had an affinity to attending certain locations where there were certain type of dancing occurring. And somehow these particular officers didn't seem to see any correlation between these particular dance locations where only certain individuals would be dancing. And somehow I got in trouble. So first off, I got in trouble for drinking a Corona. I'm not talking about in regards of the situation where I defended myself later in 2010. I'm talking in reference to a Corona in Captain Beer's office. His last name was Beer, okay? And I got in trouble for drinking a beer when I was drinking a Corona, which I didn't understand was beer. And then, because of certain other things, especially with this particular individual, having attended certain locations, you know, oh, they're called gentlemen, are they? And if that's what you call yourself, that's nice. And you can take that in reference. And so this particular individual was upset. Didn't put any, you know, there was I can make another reference for those who know. So Captain Beer happened to like a particular location, hypothetically, and so anybody who knows me from scuba diving and or what's supposed to be considered the adult lifestyle consenting aspects, they know my colors. So anybody in San Antonio who could put that reference together, that would happen to just so me. Hypothetically, Captain Beer's particular, you know, on the other side, there was a palace sort of location. Though Captain Beer, which couldn't put that together in reference to the possibility of anywhere else other than, you know, that wild sort of situation. But, you know, I was 17 years old, so what would I know other than I was born and raised in New Jersey? As far as that's concerned, who could I have ever met in the state of New Jersey? Don't even have to go into the 5 boroughs in New York City. No. So why would I be confused about, you know, the accusation of getting a drink regarding beer and I had a Corona? It's not same, in my defense, okay, in my defense, just throwing that out there. Sure, Captain Beer was good looking, except the facts that he was the company commander. That is called fraternization, and that's not acceptable, because that you can get in trouble for that. And I was 17 years old. Although I do like older in that regard, but nonetheless, yeah, at that point in time, I'm just gonna point that out there, I got in trouble for that. I didn't even do anything wrong. Sure, okay, fine, I learned, and still, okay, in my defense, it says you have to be 21 years old for alcohol. It is called a Corona. It's not called alcohol. It's called Corona. In my defense. I know it is 22 years later. Nonetheless, in my defense. Just pointing that out there. And then when he tried calling it a beer, as I looked at his name plaque on the desk while he was wearing his BDUs with his name, beer. And then knowing in the particular reference of no, Captain Beer, I did not get anything to drink of a beer. I might be wild. Not there, though, because there are certain similarities to certain clothing. Not fully, obviously, depending on. Usually there's a little bit more clothing, especially in the lower vicinity of. However, no, Captain Beer, I didn't have any beer to drink. You know, I can make the joke now about Abbott and Costello, as far as that's concerned. And since beer starts with a B, Abbott, Costello, A, B, C. 1, 2, 3. Nonetheless, so, you know, having been to, I think that, you know what, I think it was where I got the tickets for the raid. I think that's where that was. Don't remember where it was, though. Nonetheless, got the, which in my, and then in my defense, I didn't know that it was considered contraband, because contraband translates to stuff that you have in comparison to going. Just pointing that out. I know it's a little late, just saying. I suppose this is the only time as a biological female I'm okay with being late. So. I'm okay with that one. That's the only time I'm not really a fan of being late, especially being a biological female. But if I have to be late, that type I'm okay with. In comparison, especially with the reference of as to the prior portion. It's fine, I can make fun of myself easily. So nonetheless, I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of where some of the conspiracy theory-ish sort of stuff stems from. The thinner ones, and possibly even stuff like the San Antonio current. So the way I view it in that reference point, it would be like it would start as conspiracy theory-ish sort of stuff before it went to the thicker whatever-ish, and then to the San Antonio current before the San Antonio Express News, and then how it expands out as that particular reference point for that example. So that's a possibility as to how that might actually progress forward. So in reference to ENRON up in the tri-state area, especially in the 1990s, so the word on the street was that the guy, the idiot savant, he just, nobody knew. Like, there were people who knew, and then there were people who had an idea, but didn't know, and then there were people who knew, but didn't know, but knew, and they were all, it wasn't that they had certain viewpoints, though some did, because it depended on, especially at the time frame. So the aspects regarding Enron, when it really started getting bigger in those references, the rumors were that this idiot savant had only pissed off people, but didn't. He had pissed these people off because essentially he couldn't figure out how to speak with them. Conversely, same thing. So it was, from what the rumors were, it was both sides were upset, except they were more upset at themselves than other factors. So they were angry at this idiot savant because they were angry that they didn't know this idiot savant was that intelligent. And yet the rumors were that they knew he was intelligent, but they couldn't figure out certain factors. So there was a back and forth as far as that was concerned, as far as the rumors. And he really was an idiot. And not in a mean way, as far as that's concerned. It was one of, as far as the rumors were concerned, he really wasn't an idiot, but he was. He just didn't pick up on the nuances that most people knew about. He was one of the, it's the wording. So, according to people at the time, he really was just one of the kindest people you would ever meet. Would literally, so there was an example that was given to me that this idiot savant had done, out of nowhere, shows up to this location, and everybody's doing whatever they're doing, and of anybody at this particular location, this individual drops something. This idiot savant is wherever he was, and runs up, picks it up, and hands it to who this idiot savant has absolutely no idea. Everybody else knows exactly who this guy is, except for the idiot savant. The idiot savant is literally the idiot in this reference. Kind, sweet, goes on his way, doesn't really think much of it at all, whatsoever. Just goes and takes care of stuff, and anybody else that would have had the opportunity instead would have taken it from that guy because of knowing who that particular individual was. And instead, this idiot savant knew that it was expensive, but it was not his. So instead, just gave it directly back to, well, this guy is so flabbergasted because first and foremost, it's nothing to him. It's not important. It's not that it's not important. It doesn't have any sentimental value officially. It's a drop in the bucket to this guy. It's nothing. It's water is more expensive. A piece of paper is more expensive to this guy. And this idiot savant runs up, gives it to this guy. Rumors were, this guy is so baffled, so completely blown out of the water as far as how, and I know I brought up Captain Beer, but I'm not talking in that reference. And so I have to go there because I was right there. There are these doors right here. I just decided to walk through them at the same time. And so this idiot savant literally just, well, here you go, and then goes on his way. This guy who everybody and anybody knows who this guy is. He's so beyond being well off that everybody that finds out about it, because it was a rumor, is just, this idiot did what? And the guy was so it was funny when people had discussed it, later and stuff. So this happened in I think it was 1990, it was 1995. And so hearing about it in 1996-ish time frame, this idiot savant just here you go. It's no big deal. The rumors were that this guy is so beyond being well off, which, has no idea about how this idiot savant could be this much of an idiot. And yet, at the exact same time, really reiterating that idiot savantness. But it's the honesty. It wasn't something that anybody in more normal aspects would do, especially in the 1990s in New York City, or Pennsylvania, or New Jersey. And so this, whoever he is from the rumors, is so just really, who is this? Because the rumors were, this guy wanted to know who the idiot was. I'm going to guesstimate this is how the name Idiot Savant comes around. Because this guy is just, first off, he didn't even know that who he was speaking with, who had given the stuff back, was the idiot savant that everybody was looking for. Had absolutely no idea. There were rumors as to who this guy was, what he looked as, but nobody really knew. They had ideas, there were some things here and there, but nobody really knew, except for some people. Some people knew, and they were business individuals. So it was more along the lines of, yeah, who knows who that idiot could be? We do. We know exactly, but we're not gonna say because we don't know how much of an idiot this idiot savant actually is. Wow, is this guy, and then this is the irony regarding some of the rumors. These people had hung out with this guy and were confused so many times because 1 second, dumbest of the dumbest of the dumbest of the dumb. The next second, these epiphanies in every direction. Completely just to different levels. That each of the individuals are and what did you just say? Because a second ago, and now you're just, really? Oh. And so the rumors were, unfortunately, some of them had discussed things with certain aspects of governmental officials, and that was as it was. But yeah. He had been such an idiot savant, translating more so to the idiot part. Such an idiot that didn't even realize. Had this knowledge completely, but such an idiot. Had no inclination in any capacity of anything in any way. Because why would he? At all. It's not that he didn't care about the business aspects as far as Enron was concerned in any capacity. That's the furthest from the truth. Obviously had cared enough because you have to take in consideration how many lives, as far as the assistance and the benefit of and to. Especially when you look at now in the year of 2022 with how many people utilize electricity in some capacity of. How many people utilize phone lines in whatever capacity of. However many people utilize some version of cable. This idiot savant, nobody would have seen as, but knew, but didn't. Literally just in plain sight. And yet, the rumor was that some of the individuals who knew, they wondered which one was dumber, the idiot savant or they themselves, because they didn't know how they missed it because of certain signs. And yet, at the same time, they knew how dumb this idiot savant could be. So it was kind of a back and forth of issues in that regard, where it was so literally this is literally to this level of, are you serious, as far as like some of the discussions back in the 1990s when the Enron stuff became a larger thing. And so it was kind of funny because I remember walking around and listening to some of the individuals. And a few times it was, well, who are you talking about? And everybody had a different code name for this guy. So in certain groups, it was whatever. In other groups, it was whatever. In other groups. And everybody knew who they were talking about. And when they would discuss this idiot savant, essentially, there was the common code word. I just can't remember what it was. And so, but there were quite a few individuals that knew and yet didn't, and it was kind of an irony because it was as it was. So yeah, the idiot savant situation where this guy came up with all this stuff and they were all in the same vicinity, and some individuals just had difficulties understanding the level of genius, and at the exact same point in time, the level of stupidity. So it was kind of almost like an absent-minded professor sort of situation, where completely, just to these different levels of explanations, and then yet at the exact same time, was as it was. So I remembered that. I'm in the middle of putting my stuff together in regards of my website, and I just remembered that. As far as that was concerned. I didn't ever get to find out whether or not they found the idiot savant or not. But they did get Enron going, so I guess by technicalities, they found the idiot savant. There was a lot of stuff that occurred though, and so, but yeah, that was something I remembered before my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. But yeah, the Enron situation was pretty big in the tri-state area. It was much larger than some people really had known as far as that's concerned, but also because of how much of importance it was. I mean, realistically. And so, it's kind of an irony as far as that's concerned, but yeah, total idiot savant. And so, that's what it was said as far as that was concerned. I had heard some rumors that he had kind of been swooped up. Nobody really, only a few people knew who he was and where he went to and stuff, because he still worked on stuff. But then there were rumors as far as that was concerned regarding the original aspects of, because of how much of an asset this guy was as far as that was concerned. And so it got to a level. It was the closest reference I could give, which is not the same at all in any capacity. So I had listened, well, I mean, I guess technically it could in some ways, but in a different capacity. So the news had reported about Senator John McCain, how he and his family came to be, as far as he had survived all of these other situations, and from what I remember hearing, the family that he had essentially been involved with before, if I remember correctly, they had tracked him down or something like that. Then again, he had also survived that whole aspect of, and I don't know how that went as far as, that seemed interesting when I had listened to it, but I was working on some other stuff, so I didn't get to pay too much attention to detail as far as that's concerned, but I went on my own little way doing my stuff that I was working on. I can't remember what year it was though. I know I had heard it on the news, and it was during the time frame of my Medal of Honor project stuff, when I was very heavily into it. Right now I am taking a break. It's not that I can't still do it, I can. I just need to take a break. It's after a few things, mainly after February 2022, seeing the evening skyline, I need a moment to process that, because that's the first time of seeing the evening skyline of New York City since 1998, and knowing a lot, and then remembering, so when I went to Old Tenet Presbyterian Church, there were areas, and yes, I know that at the time frame of 2020 with the COVID situation, but there were these blue tape areas, and I had grown up going to the church, and I can't remember some of their names, but there were certain family members that always sat in those particular vicinities. So I've had to kind of take a moment regarding my Medal of Honor art project trips, especially seeing the congregation size compared to, and because a lot of congregants in 1993 had worked up in New York City. And so, in reference to 2001, that's a very direct site that I've been working on, dealing with since December of 2020. And I do what I can to not be too emotional because of a lot of stuff. So, in 2022, this year, a few months ago in February, it's the first time I've seen the evening skyline from a location that I would recognize. And so I appreciate you listening to and watching. And so make sure to subscribe to my official YouTube channel and like my official YouTube video, and go to my website, www.susanmealing.com. You guys have a good day. Thank you.